Zari had always believed that life was meant to be simple. She was born in a quiet village surrounded by endless fields of wheat, golden under the sun and soft under her feet when harvest season came. Her earliest memories were of running barefoot through the long green stalks, listening to the sound of the wind brushing past them like a mother humming a lullaby. Her father was a farmer, as was his father before him, and her mother was a woman who could turn a handful of seeds into a season of blessing. From them, Zari learned everything she knew about the earth, how it breathed, how it changed moods, how it rewarded patience and punished neglect. She understood the smell of soil after rain better than she understood perfume. She recognized the rhythm of seasons better than the dates on a calendar. To the world, she was just a farmer. But to herself, she was someone deeply connected to nature, someone who found meaning in watching things grow. Every morning she woke before the sun. While the village still slept under the last hour of night, Zari tied her hair back, drank a cup of warm tea, and stepped outside with tools in her hand. She walked towards her fields as though walking towards a dear friend. The air at dawn was always cold enough to make her fingertips stiff, but she liked it. It made her feel alive, awake. And the moment the first rays of sunlight spread across the land, she felt strong again, ready to begin her work. Her routine never changed much. She inspected the soil, removed stones, checked the irrigation channels, and adjusted the flow of water whenever it was needed. Her hands were rough, her skin sun-tanned, and her clothes simple. She never cared about fashion. The fields were her world, and the tractor was her companion. She drove it with the ease of someone who could do it with eyes closed. She knew how much pressure to apply, how sharply to turn, how to adjust weight on uneven land so the machine wouldn't topple. Her father often said, "This girl drives better than men who've been doing this for 20 years." She laughed every time he said that, but inside, she knew it was true. Her instincts were quick, her senses sharp. She could estimate distance with surprising accuracy, and she could tell by the slightest tilt whether a surface was safe or dangerously sloped. But despite these talents, Zari never saw herself as extraordinary. She never dreamed of being anything more than a hard-working woman who loved her land. She didn't crave fame or adventure. She didn't imagine herself saving lives or becoming a hero. Her biggest wish, if she ever had one, was simply that her crops would grow well each season so she could support her aging parents. Her dreams were small but pure, a secure home, healthy crops and peaceful nights. Every now and then, when she took a break from work, she would lie on her back in the shade of a tree and watch airplanes streak across the blue sky. They looked like silver birds, moving faster than she could imagine. She would trace their path with her eyes until they disappeared behind clouds. "Must be interesting up there," she murmured once. Her father chuckled. "Too high for us farmers. Our world is down here." And Zari agreed. She never imagined herself inside one of those flying machines. She preferred solid ground beneath her feet, the smell of wheat in her hair, and the comfort of knowing exactly what she was capable of. The village people respected her. They admired her strength, her work ethic, and the quiet kindness she showed everyone. She helped neighbors repair broken fences, shared her seeds when someone's crops failed, and taught children how to plant their first sapling. She was never loud, never boastful. She believed good deeds didn't need witnesses. Life, to her, was steady and predictable until the day everything changed. She didn't know then that life had been preparing her all along. Those early mornings, those long days driving the tractor, the countless hours learning how the earth responded to weight and movement, all of it was shaping her for something she had never dreamed of. She had no idea that this simple farmer, who had never left her village except for rare trips to the town market, would one day face a situation where hundreds of lives would depend on her judgment, her instinct, her courage, but for now, she was just Zari, a farmer with dirt under her nails and the sun on her skin, living a life that seemed perfectly ordinary. She didn't know the sky was waiting for her. Zari had never been on an airplane in her life. The farthest she had ever traveled was the district city, and even that was rare. But that week, she had to visit the capital to sign some agricultural paperwork and attend a training session on new farming techniques. The government had offered to cover her travel costs, and the officer casually said, "You'll go by plane. It's faster." A plane? The idea made her chest tighten a little, not because she was frightened, but because the sky had always felt so unreachable. Yet she agreed. Life required learning, and she wasn't the kind of woman who backed away from something just because it was unfamiliar. The morning of the flight, she wore her simplest clothes, tied her hair neatly, and carried a small cloth bag. At the airport, she felt like a stranger among polished floors, bright lights, and people dressed like they had stepped out of magazines. She walked slowly, reading signs, observing everything with a mix of nervousness and curiosity. When she finally boarded the plane, she glanced around like a child stepping into a new world. The seats were softer than she expected. The windows were smaller. The ceiling felt low, and the hum of the engines created a constant vibration. She took her seat beside the window and tried to relax. As the plane began to move, she gripped the armrests tightly. The acceleration pushed her back, and for the first time in her life, she felt the sensation of leaving the ground. The village, the fields, the people, all of it stayed far below as the plane climbed toward the sky. She whispered to herself. So this is what flying feels like. For the first 10 minutes, everything was smooth. The passengers settled in, the flight attendant smiled and served water. And Zari began to appreciate the view from the window. The clouds looked like soft mountains drifting peacefully beneath them. But peace, she would soon learn, was temporary. Without warning, a loud, violent explosion echoed from the plane's left side. It sounded like metal tearing in half. The entire aircraft shook with a force that knocked drinks to the floor and made passengers scream. The lights flickered, and the calm hum of the engines turned into a sickening silence. Then came another sound, a deep grinding roar, followed by a sudden drop. The plane was losing altitude. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers, strained and trembling. Ladies and gentlemen, we have experienced a critical engine failure. Please remain seated and keep your seatbelts fastened. People panicked instantly. A baby cried uncontrollably. A man shouted, "What's happening?" A woman began to pray loudly. The flight attendants struggled to stay calm, but fear had already settled into their eyes. Zari's heart pounded, but she remained more observant than panicked. She felt the plane tilting harder to one side. The left engine wasn't just damaged. It had completely failed. She knew the sensation of uneven weight. She had felt something similar when a tractor lost traction on one side. The plane shuddered again. This time, even worse, a second explosion. This one from the right side. The right engine died. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was terrifying. The engines were the heart of the plane, and now both were gone. The aircraft was gliding, but poorly, and every few seconds it dropped sharply, making stomachs lurch and passengers cry out. The captain's voice came again, this time filled with pure fear. Both engines have failed. I repeat, both engines have failed. We are attempting an emergency descent. Attempting. The word struck Zari deeply. Not executing. Not controlling. Just attempting. She looked at the pilot's cabin door. It was slightly open, and she could see a glimpse of chaos, buttons flashing, alarms buzzing, the pilot sweating, the co-pilot shaking, their hands flying desperately over the controls. She wasn't a pilot. She didn't know anything about aviation, but she understood one thing perfectly. This plane was falling, and if someone didn't act fast, they were going to crash. The aircraft rattled violently, and people clutched their loved ones. A child cried, "Are we going to die?" While his mother tried to shield him even though she was trembling herself. Zari's breathing grew heavy, but her mind was sharp. She stared out the window. A wide, open landscape stretched below, patchy and rugged, but with areas that looked flat enough to land on. Her eyes darted, measuring distance, evaluating ground texture, estimating slope, skills she had honed over decades without ever realizing how valuable they could become. The plane sank lower. Alarm screamed in the cockpit. The co-pilot shouted, "We're too high. We're too fast. We won't make it." Zari felt something shift inside her, not fear, but clarity. A strange calm washed over her, the same calm she felt when a tractor tire slipped dangerously on muddy ground. Her instincts took over. Maybe she didn't know how to fly a plane, but she knew how to guide something heavy toward the earth without letting it flip, tumble, or crash. And as the aircraft continued to drop, she realized something shocking. Her whole life had trained her for this moment. The plane was dropping faster now, shaking so violently that the overhead compartments rattled like they were about to burst open. Oxygen masks dangled above passengers' heads, swaying with every sudden dip. Screams filled the cabin, but amid all that chaos, Zari felt something shift inside her, a pull, a voice, a strange certainty. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "Ma'am, no!" The flight attendant yelled, grabbing her arm. "You can't move right now. Sit down." But Zari's voice was steady, almost unnaturally calm. "I need to go to the cockpit." The flight attendant blinked at her as if she had gone mad. "The cockpit? Why?" "You can't." Zari didn't argue. There was no time. She stepped forward, pushing through the aisle as the plane lurched again. People shouted, "Sit down! You'll fall!" "What are you doing?" But she kept moving. When she reached the cockpit door, she knocked once firmly. The door opened just enough for the terrified co-pilot's face to appear. His forehead was drenched in sweat. "You can't be here," he snapped. "Go back to your seat." "I can help," Zari said simply. The pilot looked up from the controls. His hands were trembling, his eyes wide with panic. "Help, lady, unless you're a trained pilot, you can't do anything. We're going down too fast. We don't have thrust, our angle is wrong, the ground is too uneven." Zari didn't flinch. "I know uneven ground. I know slopes. I know how machines behave when weight shifts. You need another pair of eyes. Let me look." Maybe it was the way she said it. Not loud, not emotional, but firm and filled with a strange authority. Maybe the pilot had nothing left to lose, or maybe fate simply intended for her to be there. Whatever it was. He hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Fine. What do you see?" Zari leaned forward and scanned the view through the cockpit window. The ground was rising toward them faster than she expected. Fields, patches of dirt, rocky areas, some places smooth, some deadly uneven. The plane needed a flat stretch long enough to skid to a stop, but not too hard to shatter on impact. Her eyes moved rapidly, analyzing every inch. "There," she said, pointing. "A flat patch, slightly downhill." The angle will slow your speed. The soil looks soft. The landing gear might dig in, but it won't break instantly. Asterisk, the pilot squinted. That? Asterisk. It's your best chance. Asterisk, the co-pilot shook his head. We're too high. We'll overshoot it. Asterisk, Zari didn't look away from the window. Then adjust your descent. Bring the nose up a little. Not too much. You'll stall. Just enough to glide longer. The pilot followed her instructions almost instinctively. The plane stabilized slightly. Asterisk passengers felt the shift, the sudden steadiness after the violent shaking. A few screams died down. Someone whispered, "What's happening? Why does it feel smoother?" Asterisk, but inside the cockpit, tension still hung thick in the air. Warning alarms continued beeping. Altitude numbers dropped rapidly. The ground rushed up to meet them. Asterisk, Zari's mind worked faster than it ever had. Her farming instincts sharpened everything: the angle of approach, the shape of land, the texture of soil, the slope of the field. "Turn 2 degrees left," she instructed. The pilot obeyed. Asterisk. "Tilt slightly right. The ground dips there." He adjusted. "Keep your wings level. If you tilt too much, you'll roll." He steadied. A harsh gust of wind slammed into the plane. It skidded sideways in the air. The co-pilot gasped, "We're losing alignment." Asterisk, Zari gripped the back of the pilot's seat. "Correct it. Push your right rudder hard." The pilot pushed. The plane swung back into alignment. Asterisk, the ground was close. "Too close." Asterisk, "Flaps full." The pilot shouted. Asterisk, "Flaps full." The co-pilot confirmed. Asterisk, the plane's nose lifted slightly, slowing the descent. But not enough. The altimeter spun downward. The field approached rapidly, a brown, dusty stretch of land that had no idea it was about to become an emergency runway. Zari's voice cut sharply through the noise. "You need to flare just before touchdown. Not too early. You'll stall." "Wait. Wait." "Now." The pilot pulled back at the precise moment she commanded. The plane's nose rose gently. The aircraft trembled under the sudden drag. Its shadow raced below it, merging with the earth. Asterisk, boom. Asterisk, the wheels hit the ground with a bone-shaking impact. The landing gear bounced, then slammed again. The plane skidded violently, kicking up clouds of dust. People screamed. Luggage flew. The wings wobbled dangerously. Asterisk, keep it straight. Zari yelled. The pilot gritted his teeth, fighting the rudder pedals. The ground was uneven. Every bump threatened to flip the aircraft. But the plane kept sliding forward slower, 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 until finally it stopped. Silence filled the cabin, a deep, trembling silence. Asterisk, no engines, no alarms, no motion. Asterisk, just the sound of dozens of people crying softly, realizing they were alive. The pilot looked at Zari, his voice breaking. You saved us." Asterisk, but she shook her head. Asterisk, no, we saved each other. She didn't know it yet, but the world outside was already calling her something else. A hero. Asterisk, for several long seconds, nobody in the aircraft moved. It was as if time itself had frozen. Dust floated in the sunlight slanting through the cracked windows. Passengers stared wide-eyed at one another, and the only sounds were heavy breaths and a few muffled sobs of relief. Asterisk, then. Slowly reality caught up. A man began crying openly. A woman clutched her child tightly, repeating, "You're safe. You're safe?" Another passenger whispered, "We survived. We actually survived." Asterisk, someone unbuckled their seatbelt, then another. Then suddenly the entire cabin erupted with voices, half shocked, half celebratory. All overwhelmed. Asterisk, the flight attendants moved shakily through the aisles, checking on passengers. One of them spotted Zari standing near the cockpit, still breathing heavily, still steady despite everything that had happened. She walked toward her, tears in her eyes. Asterisk. The attendant whispered, "You helped us land. You guided the pilot." Asterisk. Zari shook her head gently. "I only showed what I could see." Asterisk. But word had already started spreading inside the aircraft. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Asterisk. That woman saved us. Asterisk. She helped land the plane. Asterisk. She told the pilot where to go. Asterisk. She kept us alive. Asterisk. She's a hero. Asterisk. The door finally opened, letting in bright sunlight and fresh air. Emergency teams ran toward the plane, their boots thudding loudly on the ground. Fire trucks, ambulances, rescue workers, all rushing to help, expecting the worst. But what they found was a miracle. The plane had landed without breaking apart. There was damage, yes, scorched metal, bent landing gear, cracked windows, but the aircraft was intact. And every single passenger was alive. Asterisk. A senior rescue officer burst inside the cabin. "Is everyone okay? Who's injured?" Asterisk. Before anyone else could speak, the pilot pointed at Zari with a trembling hand. Asterisk. "She saved the aircraft," he said, voice choked with emotion. "If it wasn't for her guidance, we would have crashed into the hillside." Asterisk. The officer stared at her, a simple woman in plain clothes. Dust on her face, hair slightly undone, hands still trembling from the intensity of it all. Asterisk. "You did that?" he asked softly. Asterisk. Zari swallowed. "I just told him where the land was safe." The officer nodded as if he already knew the answer. People like her didn't brag. Soon cameras arrived. Journalists rushed toward the plane as passengers were led outside. Microphones stretched toward Zari from every direction. Asterisk. "Ma'am, how did you do it?" Asterisk. "Are you a pilot?" Asterisk. "What training do you have?" Asterisk. "How did you stay so calm?" Asterisk. "What did you see that the pilots didn't?" Asterisk. Zari felt her face flush. She had never faced a camera before, never spoken to reporters, never imagined she would stand before the world like this. Asterisk. The pilot stepped beside her, still shaken. He spoke into the microphones. Asterisk. "Our instruments were failing. We were losing altitude too fast. We couldn't find a landing site in time. She spotted this field and guided every move. She saved over 100 lives." All eyes turned to her. She took a breath and said slowly, honestly, Asterisk. "I am not a pilot. I am a farmer. My whole life I have worked on uneven land. I know slopes, soft soil, hard ground, dangerous dips. I know how machines behave when they are too heavy or losing balance. When I saw the ground from above, I just understood what to do." Asterisk. A wave of silence washed over the crowd. Reporters lowered their microphones, rescue workers exchanged stunned looks, and passengers nodded in quiet admiration. A farmer, a woman whose hands were used to holding tools, not steering giant machines. Asterisk. Yet, in the moment of greatest danger, she became the person everyone depended on. Asterisk. One of the children who had been crying earlier approached her shyly, holding his mother's hand. Asterisk. "Auntie," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Thank you for saving us." Asterisk. Zari's heart tightened. She crouched and smiled softly at him. "You were very brave too." Asterisk. His mother wiped her tears and said, "No, you were brave." Asterisk. As the crowd grew, Zari's parents were contacted. Hours later, they arrived, running toward her with fear and relief etched on their faces. Her mother pulled her into a fierce hug. Asterisk. "Are you hurt?" Asterisk. "No, Amy," Zari whispered. "I'm okay." Asterisk. Her father's eyes were glossy. "You landed a whole aircraft." he said, disbelief woven into every word. My daughter. Zari lowered her gaze, embarrassed by the attention. I didn't land it. The pilot did. I just helped him see what was already there. But the truth was clear to everyone. Without her instinct, without her calm, without her eyes trained by years of working the land, the story would have ended very differently. That evening. Newspapers printed headlines like Farmer Woman Saves Airline Flight, Rural Hero Guides, Aircraft to Safety, Courage in Crisis, How a Farm Girl Became a Sky Legend, but Zari read none of them. She sat quietly with a warm cup of tea, hands wrapped around it, feeling the weight of the day settling into her bones. She had never wanted fame. She had never asked for recognition. Yet life had given her a moment, a single moment, where everything she had learned in her simple life became the reason dozens of people breathed again. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. You know, he said gently, maybe the sky wasn't too high for us farmers after all. Zari smiled. She had been a farmer her whole life, and that day, she became a hero. But in her heart, she remained the same, a woman who understood the earth so deeply, that she could even save a falling plane returning to it.